I'm going to talk about, I think everybody in this space that's building these systems wants to build uh, keeping everybody's incentives in mind, um, which is a hard problem because we're in a inherently extremely like capitalistic environment. Um, so we're trying to balance capitalism basically with social responsibility. Um, so this is the problem statement. Permissionless networks enable intense economic competition, but without proper incentive design and engineering, this competition risks becoming extractive, opaque, and centralizing. MEV presents a critical challenge. How do we allow participants to profit from their edge without eroding trust, decentralization, and the legitimacy of the network itself? It's a whole load of shit. What it really means is we built these systems and we haven't really taken user incentives in mind. Users are getting a lot worse pricing on Solana, on Ethereum. When you look at the data, it's not competitive against like traditional financial systems. But the first step is always going to be a sort of like centralized version of these systems, and that's where we are right now. It's hard. It's a hard problem to balance between all these different entities. If you think about it, there's validators, there are market makers, there are degen retail users, which are like users that want to 10x on Fartcoin, and then there's sophisticated retail. That would be someone like me that's not a professional trader, but I understand how the system works. So I understand what's going on, and I continue to use it regardless of like knowing that I'm going to get screwed. If we want to compete against TradFi, then we need to compete on what really matters to users. It's not like SocialFi or any of that. Like the prominent use case in blockchains is stablecoin payments and trading. So we need to optimize for those things. So just some quick context. I know you guys probably know most of this stuff, but most blockchains are public ledgers, with the exception of like a Monero or a secret network. I don't know if that's still around, but the public ledgers. Traditionally, blockchains have had network-wide mempools. Bitcoin was the first network, obviously has a mempool. Ethereum had a mempool. Solana was mempool-less. Added a mempool into Solana and rugged it. I'll talk about that later. Now we're getting into a world where there's private order flow deals. And it's kind of like these private mempools are spawning up. MEV is it's an inherent property of these systems. It has a negative connotation. People think MEVs. I'll define MEV for the room. MEV, in my mind, is the potential value that can be extracted from a block based on the ordering of transactions. It has a very negative connotation. Probably the acronym is not good. I think a better acronym is what's been coined recently is REV. Kind of mean different things, but it's not something that we should try to spend energy on getting rid of. It's something that we should just embrace as like an inherent property of these systems and try to optimize for user pricing. So who are the players? Yeah, like I said earlier, you have degen retail. This is long tail asset traders, people that trade on Pump.fun, Banana Gun, these sorts of apps, looking for a 10x. Sophisticated retail. This is probably most of us in the room. Maybe there's some professional traders in here. You have market makers, HFT searchers, and then you have order flow aggregators like Jito, RPCs, any system that sits in between validators and the end user. So just quick overview, the way Jito works is we sit in between the network and users, we receive transactions, we run an off-chain block auction, and we submit the most profitable batch of transactions to the validator. So in a sense, we're kind of like this order flow aggregator. We get all these transactions, and then we're responsible for submitting responsibly to the validator. We are Benevolent. You can trust me. But a malicious order flow aggregator, like a bad RPC or others, may leak your transaction, which has bad effects, and we'll talk about that later. So I think so far the current state of the world is that we've maximized the incentives of searchers and validators, but we haven't really paid much attention to users. I hope this doesn't sound too negative. In a good place. All right, so Solana pre-Jito. No mempool. It had a non-deterministic buggy scheduler. Scheduler code is really hard. Scheduler code is basically just a piece of software that tries to order what transactions should get executed on the network in a way that maximizes profit. It's a bit of a knapsack problem. It's not easy. It took about 5 years for them to get it right. Today it's better. And then pre-Jito, yeah, it was prone to UDP flooding attacks. There was a data center that got pretty much brought down once from just like UDP DOS attacks. So Jito came in. We look at ourselves as like a ring around the network. Solana's in the middle. We get all this sort of like spam and bad transactions, and then we try to output a clean stream to the network, the validator. Actually, funny story. So when Trump launched his meme coin, like early this year, we had a DOS vector where we weren't clearing a buffer fast enough, and it brought our system down for about 4 hours. And Solana was basically unusable during that, which was like, it was cool because it meant what we built is important, but it was also shitty because it meant a $70 billion network is reliant on a team of 8 engineers in America. So that's not great. But 94% of the network is running Jito today, so we can't ignore it. So I mentioned we introduced a mempool. For those of you that don't know what a mempool is, it's basically it's a waiting room for transactions before they get into a block. And what you decide to do with those transactions is an implementation detail. What we were doing was streaming them out to searchers. And pretty much every trade was getting sandwiched. And sort of like at the height of our revenue and profit, we just shut it down. We didn't want to be responsible for that. Super controversial. Got great engagement on the tweet. So we took the mempool down. We're hoping to solve a problem through social slashing. Basically, we take the mempool down. Validators don't do backdoor deals. That's actually not the case. That doesn't work. It works to an extent, but it buys you some time, but it doesn't actually work in the long run. We shouldn't design systems relying on their like social reputation. Right now, we're seeing a rise in private mempools. A cool thing about proof of stake systems is that you can actually use your stake as a force of good to try to move stake around and not give validators power that are spinning up private mempools. But it's a chicken and egg because there's all these games around like sibling validators and things like that. So how extractive are we? On Solana in the past 24 hours, we had 6,000 sandwich attacks, 577 SOL worth of sandwich. That's like 90,000 maybe. Can't do the math. It's a lot of money. I think it's like 30 million a year at that price. Ethereum's not so much better either. High percentage of the MEV on Ethereum is just sandwich attacks. So there's a lot of money being extracted from users. If you people hate when I say this, but if you think of Solana as a casino, like a globally distributed casino, which is really cool, by the way, that we have a globally distributed casino. If you think about it like that, and all your casino participants run out of money because all the slot machines just keep rugging them, and you have no customers left. So we have to keep the wheel going, and we can't just take all our customers' money. This is what sandwich architecture looks like today. So You have clients, dApps, searchers, anyone who's sending a transaction on the network, wallets, whatever. They can send directly to the block engine, or they can send to an RPC. It goes through the block engine. It is not leaked, and it goes to the validator. But now, I'm telling you to trust me, which is not a good system design, but trust me. Validators are leaking transactions to these private dark pools. Relays are also leaking them to this, and they have like a backdoor deal with like one or two searchers who are capturing all the sandwiching profit. Whereas previous, it was like everybody was getting sandwiched, but more people were getting sandwiched, but it was more democratized across the network, which arguably is not better. So from what we know is a searcher will come to a validator and say, hey, I will pay you a fixed price based on your stake. If you have, let's say, 1 million SOL worth of stake, for every 1 million SOL, I'll pay you 30K a day or something, and give me access to your mempool. And that's pretty much how it works. Validators need to pay the bill, server bill. Solana nodes are not cheap. Know that. It's around like $700 a month, and that's not taking into account voting costs. Is also expensive. Yeah, so basically, yeah, validators are profit maxis. They want to make money, but this is kind of short-sighted because, like I said, if the users start to realize this and catch on that they're getting screwed, there's going to be a new network that pops up that doesn't screw them, and then you play the whole game again. So this is pretty funny. This guy approached me in August telling me he wanted stake from our validators. He's looking for validators that are a good fit. The strategy is very profitable, and we were going to make 150 to 200 SOL a day for every 1 million SOL stake. So I just kept prying at him, trying to figure out what he's doing. Yeah, so this is how it works. It starts with a Telegram message. Someone hits you up, hey, I want access to your stake. I want access to your mempool. I'll pay you X, and then boom, and it's a big problem. I just want to touch on the state of Ethereum today. So there are basically 10 active builders. The top 3 builders have around 90% of the block building share. The top 2 have around 82%. So you got like 2 entities that are really responsible for 80% of blocks built, which is also terrible in centralizing. There's like this dystopian version of these systems where it's like a big trading firm, like I don't know, name your favorite trading firm, comes in and just basically becomes the sole block builder by just they just have infinite capital, and then that's a terrible place to be. We're kind of heading in that direction with the way things are right now, but there's solutions to all this, and I'm getting there. Actually, yeah, I wanted to talk about this. The interesting thing about this new like PBS architecture is that all of a sudden Telegram bots, like Banana Gun, implicitly determine who the block builder is by just sending them flow. It's an interesting power shift. It's like there's all this power in this little app, and it has huge second order effects for the underlying L1. Basically, if they send them the flow, that builder has the most gas fees, they can bid the highest for blocks. So we'll go back to Solana. Order books on Solana was sort of like Anatoly's dream from the start, so it's worth talking about. Today, order book Phoenix accounts for $38 million worth of volume, which is nothing. Where when you look at 3 to 4 billion spot volume on Solana, dominated by AMMs like Orca, Radium. So order books are not working out right now in the current state. How do we make it a reality? I think the problem is it's a few things. One big problem is that makers are in a lose-lose situation. Canceling, let's say you have a resting order, that price goes stale. So now you have the option to either leave it there and get picked off, or you can pay or try to outbid the guy who's trying to take you. So either way, you're losing money. Whereas the taker kind of captures a risk-free profit, especially if they have reverb protection turned on. So, like, to elaborate a little more on that, if reverb protection is on, let's say taker loses to the cancel, taker doesn't pay any gas. The cancel still pays, like the maker still pays. So it's not really. So then what happens is you end up getting like these wide spreads on the order book because makers are taking that into account. So wider spreads, worse price, execution for users. You're not going to compete against the NASDAQ, which was like the original vision of all this. So how do we balance the interests of takers and makers? There's a few ideas. There's some centralized exchanges give priority to makers. You can't really do that on Solana. You need like some sort of like off-chain hyperliquid type of system. And so it's just to highlight that you have an example of where there's two competing incentives. It's not really straightforward how you balance that, but you want to make this thing a reality. All right, so let's to recap like what the specific issues are. So we have poor system and incentive designs, and they're leading to centralization vectors. We have backdoor deals going on where end users get the short end of the stick. And on-chain order books haven't succeeded because they're just not better. You just don't get better price. So I think, my opinion, on-chain price discovery is an ambitious goal that we should continue to try to work towards. As long as you have worse pricing on-chain and off-chain, you're not really going to get that. So how do we compete against TradFi? I'll play devil's advocate for a little bit. Retail trading long tail assets are price insensitive and explicitly set high slippage. Raise your hand if you agree with that. Okay. I used to be in that camp. I'll explain why I'm not. On-chain order books will always yield worse execution compared to centralized systems. Who agrees with that? Damn, really? So the first point, I think like why does a trader that's trading like Fartcoin set high slippage or lower market cap than Fartcoin lock in? Why do they set high slippage? Because they're trying to account for price moving against them, right? And a little bit of that has to do with latency. By the time you create the transaction and it lands on chain, if there's latency there, price will move against you. What they're really trying to express is a market order, a market buy. They don't really care about slippage. They're just saying, I just want to slam this and I just want to buy it. So the slippage is just like a mechanism to express that, but it's not really doing that because then they just get exposed to malicious searchers that sandwich them, and it's kind of self-manifesting. I think on-chain order books will always yield worse execution compared to centralized systems. Hyperliquid kind of proved this a little bit. People are willing to trade off decentralization for better pricing, user experience. They're able to set their own ordering rules. Like they implement a taker delay. So makers basically get priority. So now you have market makers that are willing to quote tighter. So you have better liquidity there. And then that's reflexive because then more people want to go trade there. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't try. So, yeah, hot air rises. Farcoin's down 5% today. I don't own any Farcoin, by the way. I think so. These are really hard problems. You can engineer yourself closer to the end state. There's this acronym that's famous amongst the Solana community, IBRL, increase bandwidth, reduce latency. If you can make things faster and more deterministic, then you won't have users that are trying to account for price moving against them due to latency between creating the transaction and landing it. So that solves a little bit. Doesn't fully solve everything, because now, what about those users that are just trying to express market orders? They're still getting exposed to malicious searchers that are going to sandwich them, whatnot. So I think you need transaction privacy. Flashbots guys have been doing a lot of research here. We've spent the past few months looking into these into privacy tech, trying to figure out how we give users better privacy. Then yeah, order flow networks. I think BuilderNet's a good example of that. How do you commoditize order flow to the extent that private order flow deals no longer actually give you an edge? I can't say more about that. So yeah, this is the stuff we're spending time right now at Jito. So it's hard because we're aligning competing incentives between all these different parties. They all have different interests. Users really just want their transactions to land fast with good pricing. Validators need to pay their bills. They hold SOL, so to an extent, they care about the long-term health of Solana. Most validators do. Searchers mostly don't hold SOL, so they're not really like what's long-term good for Solana is not necessarily top of mind for some searchers. For some it is. Yeah, so if users just keep getting subpar pricing, they'll move elsewhere. There's plenty of chains. There's like infinite block space. Market makers start moving elsewhere, and liquidity starts moving off to other places. Then it's a net negative for Solana and Ethereum and whatever network you're interested in. So we can't rely on the good faith of random internet people. We have to build systems that are like cryptographically provable to be designed the way we want them to be designed. So I'll one more time, the solutions are increase bandwidth, reduce latency, private transactions, and get rid of private order flow games. And that's all work in progress right now. This basically solves all the problems that we were just talking about. Thank you.
Yeah. We have a few minutes for questions.
What's up?
Juan, I really appreciate how candid you are with this talk and these problems. But I was also wondering with IBRL, doesn't that also have the opposite problem that the latency games that searchers play become that they're more incentivized and you have more issues like co-location with top staking validators becoming a extra protocol incentive?
Yes, I mean, that's a good point. The way I think about it is if you could, just a year ago, if you try to land a transaction on Solana without Jito, there's so much jitter in the transaction pipeline that you would have to account for all that latency and jitter. But if you were guaranteed like, hey, I'm gonna sign this transaction, I ship it off to an RPC or this order flow network, and it lands deterministically and fast, then you don't have to worry about the latency games. As a user that's just trying to trade some asset that just wants to like market buy or like trade Bitcoin in size or something. If you couple that with transaction privacy and your transaction doesn't get leaked, then you don't get exploited for whatever slippage amount you set.
Thanks.
So a lot of the solutions you're talking about are at the network layer. What do you think about the app layer trying to solve some of these issues? Like, so for example, just to, say sandwiching, if you had, let's say, batch auctions as opposed to like sort of an AMM type structure, you can't have sandwiching because every trade is at the same price. So do you see there's promise in that direction?
Yeah, for sure. I like intent-based systems. I like those systems. There's definitely I see Hyperliquid's kind of an application level solution, right? They just have their own permission set and they have their own specific rules and you kind of trust them to do that. But you can make it a little more trustless. Definitely, the onus is definitely on apps and the network. But if everything's just public and like things are getting leaked, then like there's a big hole to plug network level. What's up?
What are the social consensus around like the validators that are selling their, how to say, basically mempool to private mempool and like trying to earn yields on top of users' benefits right now? Is there any like mechanism or I guess like talks around how to solve that or maybe slash that in the Solana ecosystem? Curious.
Yeah, it's actually really hard to identify them. We've done blacklisting on our part to stop sending those guys flow and try to like move stake around, but it's hard because they just spin up new validators, or they kind of. It's a really murky game. You can kind of detect with like high probability, and the social consensus is just like move stake around, don't send them any flow. But again, that's not like it's not a hard technical solution to that.
How do you guys leverage like AI systems there or planning to?
AI systems?
Yeah,
We haven't used any.
but like in the future.
Be good? I don't know. I don't know much about AI. AI guy?
Any other questions for the keynote? All right, let's give a round of applause for Zano.